2011, I left my house and roommates at my university to go to basic training. While I was there, my roommate Levi took his own life in our empty football stadium in his dress uniform prior to making his decision. He had actually posted on social media in a way that a community of helpers like all of you could have recognized. Levi started my journey with this work, and I strongly believe that education is so important to creating and helping communities of people that have the right resources to be able to help when someone is in crisis, to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health. And Amazon cares about this as well. And this webinar directly reflects one of our newest leadership principles: success and scale bring broad responsibility, which states our local communities, planet, and future generations need us to be better every day. We must begin each day with a determination to make better, do better, and be better for our customers, our employees, our partners, and the world at large. And we must end every day knowing that we can do even more tomorrow. And I think that's why all of you are joining us today. So my team at Amazon, Program Honor, focuses on all external community engagement for veteran service organizations in the key areas of mental health, disabled veteran support, and urgent need. Annie, who is moderating our webinar today, leads our urgent need program focusing on food insecurity and homelessness. And we are joined today by our friends at Stop Soldier Suicide, who are paving the way to innovative solutions to reducing suicide among veterans. A huge congratulations is in order for them because this week they were announced as one of the 30 finalists in the VA Suicide Prevention Grand Challenge, and they will be presenting their solution to win the $20 million grant in November. And they'll be sharing a little bit about that project later on in the webinar. I'm now going to pass it off to chapter representatives from AWS Mental Health and Wellbeing Affinity Group, or an employee resource group, who are co-sponsoring and have done so much to promote this event for us. So, Sydney?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for the introduction, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Rucker, and I am the head of partnerships for the Mental Health and Wellbeing Sales Chapter here at AWS. I come from a military family, so it's such a pleasure to be able to partner with Stop Soldier Suicide on today's important conversation. Our MHW sales org is devoted to opening discussions like these that are focused on mental health in the workplace and providing the appropriate resources to ensure that our salespeople can not only reach peak performance through improved mental health, but can also successfully cope with stressors, whether that pertains to anxiety, depression, or even self-harming thoughts.
Awesome, thanks, Sydney. Yeah, and I can give a quick introduction as well. Yeah, I'm Jake Turpin. Nice to meet everyone. I'm part of this AWS Sales Mental Health and Wellbeing chapter at AWS alongside Sydney. Like Sydney mentioned, yeah, we're super excited to partner with Stop Soldier Suicide in recognition of Suicide Prevention Month. Suicide prevention and awareness are very important topics to our chapter. So we're really looking forward to hearing more today on the different programs, projects, and signs that someone may need help straight from the Stop Soldier Suicide organization. So yeah, thanks, Charlotte, and really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Jake and Sydney, and anyone from your team, from your team that's joining us. Thank you. We'll move on to Ashley. Can you give us an introduction and start off our Stop Soldier Suicide team introduction?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Ashley Egge. I am our Senior Manager of Donor Success, and I have the honor of working with the team at Amazon, and it's an honor for us to be here today to be chatting with you all about this topic. I am really excited to have with me Chuck Eastman and Lisa Peterson. Chuck, I'll let you introduce yourself, and Lisa as well, but just real quick, Chuck is our Director of Strategic Partnerships, and Lisa is our Clinical Director, and they're going to be doing the most of the presentation today, but I am going to be here and happy to answer any questions as well. So Chuck, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Ashley, and it's really great to meet everyone today. It's an honor to be on this webinar. Looking forward to a great conversation, and we really appreciate your support and backing for such an important cause. Over to you, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Peterson. Like Ashley noted, I'm the clinical director here at Stop Soldier Suicide. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been in the trauma field for about 13 years, almost 14 now. I'm excited to share a little bit about our program and just some information today. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. So we're going to have a few slides talking through some of Stop Soldier Suicide's initiatives and resources, and then we will open for questions following that. So Lisa, you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yes, I can do that. So thank you. So what we're going to talk about today, obviously, is in line with this month and National Suicide Prevention Month. We're just going to talk about a couple of statistics to start us off. In general, we know that the veteran population is at a higher rate at risk for suicide than compared to our civilian population. That is very well known. It is a very saturated fact in many communities and many sectors. And our founders heard that for quite some time, and they wanted to do something about that. And that's kind of what will bring us to talk a little bit about some of our programs and our innovative thinking and ways of trying to kind of tackle this mission. So one thing that our organization does that I think is just amazing, and as a clinician, I was not highly exposed to some of the ways that we might reach clients in prior workplaces, but the way that we market and attempt to reach our clients. And that comes in many different forms, many different platforms. And we're very blessed to have an amazing marketing team that I always shout out to be able to saturate several media fronts, because what we found is we really want those high risk clients. And that is not often what is really searched for. We want, most organizations, companies, agencies really want to affect people before it gets to that point, and we love to be able to catch that. But we also want to get the folks who are most at risk in the next 24 hours, in the next week of having a concern. And so you have to broaden the way that you market and search for those folks, because they're not frequenting the same channels that more low or moderate risk clients might be. And so as you can see here, I will not speak to the intricacies of our marketing wizardry. They are amazing and well beyond my talents in that. But as you can see here, we do market on several different fronts. And again, we're always trying to get those clients that may be searching out ways of help or looking for assistance in a little bit different of a way. So we'll talk about next our kind of leading edge services, which is our program model. It speaks a little bit in regard on this slide to several different things. So instead of having to squint and read all the intricacies and try and understand the acronyms, I'll give an overview of that. When I came on 3 years ago now, 3 years ago tomorrow, actually, we were a resource and referral only organization. And what's really important to know about that is we value our resources, and we have some extremely wonderful vetted partners that we utilize day in and day out. But we realized we needed a clinical approach to assist in our mission to decrease rates of suicide, both in veterans and in active duty, because we do have a significant active duty population as well. In the model that we created, we knew we would need evidence-based approaches. In the suicide world and in the mental health world, especially in the nonprofit world, the proof is in the data. So we had to have a strong foundation, as you can see in that high risk zone, where we do a lot of evidence-based practices. Most people are familiar with cognitive behavior therapy, may have been in that treatment themselves. And that is what CAMS is really rooted in those cognitive behavior solutions focused evidence-based modalities that we can measure over time. We are starting a new track of evidence-based modality, which is brief cognitive behavior therapy for suicide prevention by Dr. Craig Bryant, and that is what the BCBTSP stands for. So we have two tracks for evidence-based modalities that can be really helpful that we've seen for our population, but also meets the needs in a little bit different of a way. And one thing I'll touch on very briefly is in BCBT. If you're not familiar with it, it pulls from several different modalities for PTSD, depression, anxiety, safety planning. So it hits those high notes under that evidence-based modality umbrella. We have amazing abilities in our resource referral and benefits coordinators to research a very nuanced need in a state that may not have a plentiful amount of resources, down to a specific type of therapy or treatment that someone might need, to groceries, to rent, to utility bill. And so we've been able to build out those resources in that bank over the last 10 years significantly. And we've been able to really meet a lot of different needs with that. We also have a alternative track, which kind of falls into those alternative therapies that we've been testing out since April, which we like to call our systems collaboration track. That is inclusive of really building the team for the client. So after they get the evidence-based modality, or maybe they're not quite to that point where they're able to participate in that or at the level of need, we have this track to be able to build the system to support the client where they are now. And that includes having meetings with doctors, having meetings with advocates, having meetings with VSOs, having meetings with their VA case manager to be able to help the team understand where the client is and start utilizing a little bit different of a language. And that language is based in positive psychology, not to be confused with sunshines and rainbows, but to have honest conversations that are productive and solutions focused, where the client feels like they can be vulnerable and that they can express what they actually want if they don't feel like they're on that track right now. There's a lot of nuances that go into that as well to help build the client around mind-body medicine, which is a personal love for me, and I've seen a lot of amazing trauma healing in that realm. So there's a lot of that wrapped into that track as well. The step-down service that we offer, which was something that we implemented last year, which we've seen some really wonderful initial data on, was life coaching. So what we've seen is transition period out of the military, in life in general, always causes a little bit of bumps and uncertainty and can often be linked to life purpose, which has a lot of suicidality concerns wrapped around it as well. And we found that life coaching can be extremely helpful after someone comes out of one of our treatment modalities, whether it's the systems collaboration or if it's an evidence-based modality, to solidify those habits, those learned behaviors, and to make sure that they're concrete to withstand over time. And then the individual would graduate from our program. So as you can see in that top bar, there are high-risk clients that come in. We really do try and search for those individuals because a lot of other entities simply can't handle that capacity, and we want to, and we feel our folks are trained to do that. And moderate-risk clients. So those are those folks who get the majority of the integral services and options. We do have low-risk clients. I technically do not believe there is anything such as no-risk clients. I think everyone has some level of risk, but we do have low-risk clients, and we also have third parties. Those are family members, friends, coworkers who call in with clients, and generally we do convert that client and the third party will step back. And those low-risk clients can get resource and referral benefits just as a high or moderate risk client could. And then they are followed to make sure that all of those resources are gained, complete, and working for the individual before we kind of sign off. And I just wanted to note at the bottom, you guys may have already had time to see it where I was talking, but that key that might be really helpful. If you're interested in learning more about this or a modality, you can kind of use that there. So we'll talk a little bit next about some of the data that we've seen. Now, this is just obviously a quick snapshot, but we've seen 97% of our graduates have stabilization outcomes. So that means clearly, number one, reduce suicide risks, but also around that well-being mark. And that's really where we knew we needed that. Like I like to hone in on that secondary track or adding tracks and having options, because we really don't feel that there's a one size fit all. And because we do get people in different spots on that risk stratification, we knew very quickly if we were going to reduce suicide, we were going to be able to do that to some degree with that one initial model. But we also knew we wanted people to have that extra oomph of well-being. How are they going to find purpose and live the rest of their lives without us there? Because we want to sell ourselves out of that job. So that's really where that well-being and wellness piece kicked in. We're also going to talk just for a second around some client information. These are some quotes that we get often. We often get testimonials from clients because our service is different. I like us all to stay very humble in the fact that we're not Superman. We're not selling something that that we're just so proud of for being proud of sake. We're selling something that we really feel like is out of the norm for clients and meeting a need that they struggle to get in other places. And so I did want to just share one quick story of an individual. We had a client that came in for a service, one of our services, one of our modalities of therapy. And the individual was extremely lost and had been very lost for many years. And we were really blessed to be getting him in this very pivotal point in his life. And I feel like there was a reason for that. And we were able to meet some of his needs and dig under some of the things that he did not have the awareness of. A lot of therapy modalities, a lot of organizations or agencies are only able to provide a certain modality in a certain way for a certain amount of sessions. And because we were able to take more time and break that up into pieces, we were able to dig into like really where it all started. And a lot of that for this individual was way before the military, and the military had some compounding effects on him as well. And he had so many revelations that we needed to expand the time that he needed to stay with us. And we didn't want to cut that off. And we wanted to make sure that some of those modalities and techniques and new patterns of behavior were learned and able to be retained. So we were able to do that. We were able to get him some more appropriate diagnoses. We don't like to hone in on the labels as much, but they are important for benefits and working within the VA system. So we don't want to dismiss those either. And we were able to get him re-diagnosed with some of the things that were really going to help him and assist his continued wellness journey. I love to talk about that client in particular because it was just an explosion of a case where we could see this is what we're doing it for, and there are so many nuances. But he was a extreme HRC or high risk client that we were able to spend a good deal of time. It ended up being about a year, and just kind of peel back that onion with him so that it was a more successful process. And I'm going to talk just a little bit next regarding one of our other services that we're piloting right now, Roger. So Roger is a parallel service to SSS, same treatment modalities. But what we found is there was a good portion of folks either who would not refer their family member, or the family member or client themselves felt a little leery about the word suicide being in the title. Also around the founding name, which is Stop Soldier Suicide, and we serve all branches. So we wanted to expand individuals' ability to come into our system and get our help with maybe a little less stigma, because we had to recognize the fact that whether we don't believe there's stigma there, because we're ready and prepared to handle these situations, that those things do exist. And so Roger is another way to talk about wellness, and is another way for individuals to seek help and still come into our system and get an individualized plan, but with a little less upfront, what I like to call that's a hot topic or a sensitive topic, and be able to come in with a little bit more ease and still get that approach. We saw that right out of the gate be extremely successful in obtaining clients and getting those conversions, because people seem to be less intimidated. And we got a lot of feedback around that. And we're hoping that that will be something that we can continue to explore to be able to reach these individuals. Now I'll pause there.
All right, so it's over to me. First, I'd like to highlight everything that Lisa just highlighted. This is obviously an extremely heavy topic. It's touched many of us very closely, but what I get at the end of the day from everything that Lisa just covered is hope, because there's so many systems, there's so many tracks, there's so many options for veterans that haven't worked in the past. I came into this job not fully understanding mental health, suicide prevention, nonprofit, you list it. But at the end of the day, I'm just so excited about what we're doing and how we're doing it, because it's working. And it's exciting to see it work. I've seen it personally, that I've referred friends, I've referred prior coworkers from the Army. So I just want to touch upon that. And then the additional thing I'm really hopeful for is this black box project. So I retired from the Army 2017, spent most of my career as a helicopter pilot in the Army. So aviation is just kind of how my brain works. And I came into the interview process mid or early 2020, and they were talking about this project that dealt with data, and it dealt with devices and kind of recreating the final seconds, minutes, and months of somebody's life. And I just kind of chimed in. I said, "Oh, that sounds like a black box." And they kind of looked at me and said, "Well, what do you mean by black box?" I said, "Like a black box in an aircraft. It recreates the final seconds, minutes leading up to a crash." Because prior to the 1950s, there were no black boxes on aircraft. So if there's an aircraft accident and all people on board perished, it was up to the aircraft investigator on the ground to recreate what happened. And at best, it was a guess. So he couldn't really apply those learnings to future accident prevention until they invented the black box. So the black box is actually orange, as you can see in the picture there, but it's a combination of a flight data recorder and a cockpit voice recorder. And what they use it for is in the event of an accident, they're able to recreate pretty much everything that led up to the accident. They record the voice recordings that are between the cockpits and the crew. They record power settings, atmospherics, settings for control surfaces. And if there's a fatality, they're able to, apply the data that they have, and then create lessons learned and apply that to the rest of the fleet. So in the bottom right, you'll see the Boeing 737 MAX. So Boeing unfortunately had to ground their entire 737 MAX fleet because they had 2 crash within a very short period of time. Brand new aircraft, some new flight controls, new systems on board. It was pretty much new for everybody. But what they were able to determine, there was a flight control failure that was leading up to these crashes. And if you look on the very bottom right, there's kind of that green and pink line, that was the altitude. So you can see a very rapid precipitous decline in the altitude associated with a correlated, malfunction in the control surface. So what we are hoping to do is take the same approach by collecting devices from families that have unfortunately lost a veteran or a service member to suicide. And we're using the exact same open source intelligence techniques that all the agencies use, DoD, police, and we're extracting all the data from devices. So phones, laptops, computers. We're downloading all that data. We're taking an image of the device, if you will, and then we're uploading that data into Amazon GovCloud. And we're really excited to be partnered with AWS and to leverage some of their superpowers for their machine learning and AI. And like the black box, we're really hoping to recreate the seconds, minutes, and months that led up to the veteran or service member dying by suicide. Because currently what we have a system called a psychological autopsy, which an interviewer will get together with a family and friends, and they will ask them a series of questions. But did you see anything that led up to this? Were there any signs? Were there any indicators? Did their behavior change? And it's all kind of biased in very, a variety of ways. It's biased in how the veteran or service member projected themselves, like their outward-facing persona. Everything's great, everything's going fine. It's always that suicide that somebody says, I never saw it coming. It was out of the blue. So it's kind of, it depends on how the veteran or service members project themselves. And it also depends on the interviewer as well. If the interviewer conducting an interview is, biased in any way or trained in any way, say in mental health, they may come to a conclusion that the suicide was a result of mental health illness, whereas, there's indications that many suicides aren't related to mental health. So this is taking the data and taking an unbiased view of their final seconds, minutes, and hours, and applying machine learning and AI to hopefully get new data. We're not thinking, we're hoping, but we're not thinking at the end of the day, we're going to say we can predict suicide and prevent suicide. But definitively, we're going to have a perspective on suicide that nobody else has had at this point. And it's going to be websites that they're visiting. What apps do they have? Where are they going on their phones and their devices at 3 in the morning that their spouse or loved one may not want them to know about? So it's really their inward-facing persona. It's the life, and it's the I don't want to call it it's kind of like the veil that they keep in front of them that they don't want anybody else to know. What are they researching? Have they called their insurance company to check on death benefits? There's a whole bunch that's layered into it. And with social media and all the platforms on the web right now, we're able to extract all that data. And at the end of the day, we know we're going to have insight that nobody else has had. And it's only because of partners like AWS that's allowing us to do it. So for me, it's a really exciting program. I try not to nerd out in the details because these are families. These are families that have lost loved ones. And ultimately, the most important thing we do is to take care of the loved ones for a long term. we wrap them in our arms and they become part of our family. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a golf event for a service member that had died by suicide, and I rode in the golf cart with his dad. And just having that connection, it's the long-term, sending notes on anniversaries, sending emails, staying in touch. Once they volunteer the device to us, that's not one and done. That is just the beginning of our relationship with the family, because it's all part of the healing process as well. So if you go to stopsoldiersuicide.org /Black Box Project, or if you just stopsoldiersuicide.org, any families that may be interested can fill out a series of few questions, and they'll be contacted by one of our coworkers, who also unfortunately was affected by suicide when her husband took his life after 19 years of active duty service. So she is very well connected, understands where the families may be, and because it's a process and it's a healing process, and she can help the families get through that as well. So just like to focus on hope. I am hopeful about this technology, and I am hopeful about everything that Stop Soldier Suicide is doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa and Chuck and Ashley. I just this week, my grandma called me, and she had a family friend who was a veteran, 33 years old, who took his own life. And she said to me, "Why is this happening? Like, why are veterans taking their life? I just don't understand." And I was able to tell her about the Black Box Project and some of the initiatives that you guys are doing. And I think that what it does is bring so much hope that technology can not solve these problems, but can solve some of our upstream prevention, give us more details, and not just stop at, these are the signs of someone who might be thinking of suicide, and give us more to be able to go off of, and just real hope for the future that we can keep reducing the number of deaths by suicide. So really appreciate all the work that your team does. You all are not only incredible to work with as a partner, but what you're doing is just really going to change so many lives. So thank you for being here today. We're going to open for questions. Annie, I don't think, is there anything in the chat box?
Hello, everyone. We don't have anything on the chat box right now, but we can go on with some of our registration questions. There was a lot of interest around prevention and helping those loved ones or people that you care about in the workplace, or as friends, and people wanted to know if there's resources or what to look out for.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So a couple of things. We have a lot of resources that can be tailored to the situation. So I would say call in, fill out a web form, even if it's not the client or the person that you can't get to call us. We can work with a third party. We have a wonderful, wonderful team that went from 0 to 6, who's able to really navigate our bank and pick out a particular need for the individual in that state for whatever is happening. I think maybe not more importantly, but equally important is just to kind of normalize around some of that stigma. I actually had this question asked to me this week, as one of our coworkers this week lost a friend to suicide, and said, what could I have done different, or what can I do better next time? And to them, I think everybody gets into this place where it's hard to answer. They want this magical answer, right? Like, how do I make sure that this never happens again? And we try to take more of a realistic stance in, let's first do something that is still very relevant, and that is to destigmatize having a conversation with a coworker or a friend. And I think that sounds super simplistic, but anyone that's ever walked up to someone to have a super uncomfortable conversation knows that it's not. And I think what's really important to note there is to not be scared of that lingering moment when you say, how are you doing? And they go, I'm fine. And then you go in response, okay, and you walk away, because you have your day, you have your life, that you're, the only one walking in those shoes, and being okay to stay there for a second and linger and say, but are you really okay? And I was speaking with this individual, and they actually worked in the ED during the height of COVID. And so they said, if we had just done something like that and paused and not accepted the, yeah, I'm okay, knowing in our gut, knowing in our heart that something about this person was not right. Maybe they weren't all the way to taking their life at this point, but could we have interceded by staying just one more second and saying, but are you really? Because what I think to kind of close that answer out is really important is people will receive your intention if you do something differently. If you stay there and you pause for that second and you invest in the, I didn't really just want the quick answer, I want to, I got to go do this, they will feel that intention, and human beings are really insightful that way. So I always say that that's the number one first line approach is just ask and be willing to stay there through that time of whatever that response is.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I think oftentimes when I'm talking about suicide, I always get the response of, well, if they do say that they're thinking about suicide, I wouldn't not know how to react to that. And people are fearful of that, so they don't ask or they don't pry. But I think webinars like this, or where you're seeking information and you're seeking to learn, is the first big step in like feeling comfortable with saying the word suicide out loud. So I think it's so important that we continue to do things like this, and that those of you that are attending and listening, you're doing that. You're making it more normal to talk about and make it feel more comfortable when you have a situation arise, because most likely you will, especially if people know that you are attending webinars like this. They're going to be more likely to seek you out if they know that you're. So since I have been an advocate and teaching suicide prevention, I've had more people come to me saying they're thinking about suicide, or just seeking someone to ask them that question, because they know that I talk about it and that I am comfortable with talking about it. And I think you're so right. It's more of listening to the conversation or taking the time to pause. What I wanted to ask you, and something that was brought up before this panel, that a lot of our team on the call wanted to know about. We work in a very virtual environment, especially our AWS partners that are on this call. What signs, or do you have any thing that you can tell them when you're working with coworkers virtually, what to look for, how to have those conversations in this awkward webinar environment, or any tips for that?
Yeah, so I've heard it so many different ways, but the adage that we all went home for 2 weeks was just our plan as well. And we were supposed to all go back in the office. It was Chuck's first week, I believe. And we realized very quickly that we were both in a different space, but also growing. We were hiring people that we had no intention of never meeting in person and building that rapport. Through the pandemic, many of our organizations, employees, and many of our partner organizations reached out to us saying, I know they're not dealing well with this. They're at home with their kids. They're trying to do school. They're trying to be mental health clinicians, or they're, whatever that looked like, and they won't talk to us about that. And what I saw in first response was organizations trying to do their very best with that, but mass prescribe what self-care should look like. Get out there and do yoga, get out there. And if that's not your jam, you're not going to do it, right? So you're not going to be getting the benefit of that in the way that could really reset your nervous system or reset that need that you really truly need to be full again. And what we started doing, we have an amazing HR team that we were able to, and that's the first time I've ever been able to say that as an employed adult. We have an amazing HR team who just knocked it out of the park, went above and beyond to let us try having different types of conversations in different ways in this virtual setting, having more conversations. We tried doing some virtual hours with everybody on there. Some people came, some people didn't, but to reach those people that virtual hours or speaking up in a group was not helpful for them, we just became much more intentional about having space to review workplace things, productivity, following SOPs, are we all getting those KPIs completed, but also intentional space for getting to know them and then bringing up the topics. So for instance, I would look at Ashley and say, what's going on with the kids? How's school? How are you? Just having a very straightforward conversation, But I think the nuance that really we saw the difference was having the separate space, because what will often happen is that work will take over that space and you'll need to cram all that stuff in. And then you'll be like, well, I hope you're doing okay. And then hop off the phone. And again, that brings us back to being intentional. And we have several clinicians who will never share the intricacies of their needs with me as the director or with our HR. We have EAP. We have life coaching, you know, even for our employees, and that's not what they're going to do. But for us to get a pulse on how our staff is working, we just became much more intentional about our interactions. And it wasn't all smooth sailing at first, but it became more normalized as we set that intention.
Thank you so much. That's a great suggestion, especially for leaders in this space. I find it hard to separate home life and work life when you work from home, and I think everyone probably feels that way. So also being intentional about separating that for our employees and those that we're leading is really important. So Annie, is there any other questions from the?
Yes, we actually have a few. There's a lot of interest around the Black Box project and where people can find more information about this, and questions around, will families have details and reasonings that were discovered by the project?
I'll go ahead and answer that one. So I'll start with the last question first. So we have to be very careful with the data that we are pulling from the devices, and we're very deliberate about de-identifying the data. We don't want to, well, we do understand that every family involved wants to know why, or they want to know details surrounding it. But we have to be very careful in how we approach that, because if we do offer too many details, we could reintroduce trauma. We could give them details about events surrounding the suicide that they may not need, that aren't helpful at all, that could just be worse. So we are 100% confidential in the data that we extract from the devices. As soon as it goes up in the data cloud, it is de-identified. There's no way we can access the data at a future point and, you know, review a certain name or a certain case. All the devices go back to the families as they were. So if they were unlocked when we got them, they'll get them unlocked, and it's on their agenda if they want to look through it. If it's locked when we get it, then we'll most likely end up locked back for the family. So that's really to address that, as we are very deliberate about making sure that there's a barrier between the data and the families. To find out more, like I said, it's on the stopsoldiersuicide.org website. There's a drop down for Black Box resources. There's an Explainly video on there that kind of talks more about it. There's a series of interview videos with the Murga family. Their son, Captain Austin Murga, died by suicide at Fort Bragg a couple of years ago, and they were one of the first families to take part in this program. And like I said, we've kind of wrapped our arms around them, and they're our family now. But you can hear their story and why it was important for them to do the Black Box project, because for so many families, they want to do something. You know, they don't want other families to have to suffer through that question of why. Like to Lisa's point, like, what could I have done? How could I have noticed this sooner? So families are left with that, and they want to do more. There is obviously a very delicate balance when dealing with the families. There's a difference between dealing with spouses versus dealing with parents. Some are more likely to want to find out information and want to assist, but either way, we treat them all the same as far as what information we give them, and it's delicate because it's, you know, their phone is their last, you know, for some people it's the last message they got from their loved one. It may be the last picture that they have of their loved one alive. It may be the last text message, last video. So it's almost like a shrine. So some families are just ready to go. I talked with a mother 3 weeks ago, and the very first conversation I had with her, she was learning about Black Box, and she said, well, I have my son's phone, but can I send it to you? And I was kind of taken aback, because some families, it's a 6-month process, because there's a lot of decision making that goes into it, that we have to walk them through the process, explain the technology, explain, you know, what the expectations can be. You know, we'll have the device, we'll borrow the device for up to 90 days. Most times it's less than 90 days by a significant amount. So on the website for our landing page, there's a frequently asked question guide. There's resources for the families. So it kind of explains from a family perspective, like how we handle the device, what we do with the device. You know, we handle it like a forensic piece of gear. It's cataloged, it's numbered. I mean, through the whole process, we have, you know, we can put our finger on it at any point, so we know where it is along the way. But I just encourage anyone that has any more questions to go out to the website, and you can always reach me. I'll put my email in the chat box. And I don't run the program. I'm just thoroughly interested in the program, and I can make any connections that are necessary, and I can answer probably most questions. And if not, I'll connect you to the real experts in the team.
And I just wanted to say one real quick thing about the Black Box Project as well. Charlotte, earlier you had mentioned that Stop Soldier Suicide was selected as one of the 30 finalists for Mission Daybreak, which we're very honored to have gotten that far, and we are enjoying the accelerator process. But the Black Box Project is part of the proposal that we have submitted for Mission Daybreak. And so we're proud of the project, and we know that it can really make an impact moving forward. The more devices and the more data that we get moving forward, the faster we can come up with some conclusions.
Yeah, congratulations again. Huge deal. It's a very, very big deal to be in those 30 finalists, and I'm really excited to see the demo day and see where you guys end up at the end of the challenge. So, Annie, are there other questions?
Yes, I have one directly from the chat box. It says, I am an Army veteran that has experienced soldier suicide. Is there more we can do to support this internally?
So I'm happy to do any of the discussion from what we do at Stop Soldier Suicide, but I didn't want to interrupt if you had something to share, Charlotte.
You can go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, so many of our staff are veterans as well, and they do an amazing job about having those intentional conversations. I think when you come, what I've seen as a veteran in our space, folks come in with their cultural embodiment of being in the military. And then they come into a business space with some folks who have no idea what it's like to be in the military, but are a family member or a friend of the military. And so they kind of try and find that soft spot of having upfront conversations because the dynamic is a little bit different. I always recommend coming in intentional and with the right intention, wanting to help, and people will receive that. But I always say veteran to veteran in that space, or someone who knows what it's like to experience that, don't be scared to push that a little bit. Don't be scared to stay that extra second, like I was talking earlier. People devalue, I think that's not some huge flag or panic button, but that might not be what the situation needs. And if you push that and say, okay, I hear you saying you're okay, but are you okay? And then you know a number to call with somebody. You're willing to call with them. You're not willing just to hand them the number, but to call with them. You're willing to connect them to something and to make sure that they call or get there. Those are intentional steps that other people wouldn't go the extra mile for at times because they're scared of what will be on the end of that conversation. And I think that shows a huge level of commitment to helping other veterans if you will have that more upfront conversation, that you appear like you can handle, and I'm going to stay here with you. I might not be able to give you the service that you need, but I'm going to stay here with you until you get there. We've seen that help, and we unfortunately had to have those conversations internally during the pandemic quite often. And so we had to navigate those waters as well. But I think sometimes the more simplistic approach is how you get more people to the help that they need.
Yes, thank you so much. From an Amazon perspective, internally, join your mental health and well-being affinity group, attend the events. Mental health is not just a veteran problem, it's an everyone problem. And then a veteran who may have PTSD or a TBI or some other mental health things that they're going through, their family also needs help and support and care. So seeking out those resources through your affinity group, finding out what Amazon provides for mental health is huge. But then kind of along what Lisa said, providing a space in your workplace that is open to talking about mental health. On my team, specifically on Program Honor, I talk openly about my own mental health, and if I'm not having a good mental health day, I try to set the example and say, like, this is a safe place to be able to trust me if you are feeling that way. If you need a self-care day, please, like, let me know, and I'd rather you take that. I think being honest with our bosses is something that military people are not used to doing, because in active duty, I was a lot more hesitant to share mental health because you don't know what it's going to do to your career. You don't know how they're going to react. So being open about your mental health in a space where you know you can be is really, really, really important. And I think that's something we're able to do at Amazon. And the veterans are not used to that. And if they have just transitioned from the military, and I transitioned 2.5 years ago from active duty, it was a very hard adjustment to realize that this is a space where it's okay for me to say I need a self-care day, or I'm not going to be productive, I'm not going to be the best leader that I am because I'm not all there mentally, and that's really important. So I think being vocal helps reduce the stigma, helps your coworkers, your peers, your leaders realize that you're a human being and that it's okay to talk about the things that are bothering us in our personal lives. And I think this is really, really important, because when we're in a virtual environment, we have a disconnect from the human being that is really hard, especially when people are struggling with mental health. So taking that time to maybe even take it away from trying and call that person and say, hey, let's have a phone call so I can hear your voice over the phone or something, making it a little bit more of a personal touch. But internally, Amazon, we have a lot of resources, and making sure you know those resources and are able to provide them when someone needs them is very critical. So that's all I will say on that. Annie, do we have any?
I was also just going to add, use those things that we get from the virtual environment. I have been able to start conversations with employees under me and then in other organizations to say, something looks different back there, or I noticed that you're not where you usually are, just to have those benefits. And I've been able to have conversations come from that we're able to share some different and difficult circumstances that those individuals are going through, because I was able to actually visually see in their home, which never would have been able to do before. And as Chuck has seen, you know, my children, for example, run my household. So if they're home, everyone's in trouble. So utilize the resources that we have, because we do get a little bit different of a peek into someone's personal life and being at home and working from home. And that's definitely benefited us to have open conversations.
That's so true. And it also opens, just like knowing their personal life even a little bit more than you would necessarily in the office. Like if my babies are here, sometimes they're on camera with me because I have no choice or something, and then everyone gets to see my kids or whatever. So I think that's I never thought of it that way, and I think that's really, really great. Annie, any more?
Yes, so we have one coming from the chat box saying, for people that have lost loved ones to suicide, what advice do you have to help move past seeking to understanding why?
Yeah, so we have an amazing Black Box team that if you don't end up sending a donation to them, they are set up for something like that. If you have questions or you want to learn more about that, again, we also have resources in regards to grief and those surviving friends, family members, whoever that is. So I always recommend being able to give someone something, a conversation, a number, something that you trust where you got it from. I think that's a benefit too. In different mental health spaces that I've worked in the past, we had a list, but we didn't know if those people still worked there. We didn't know You know, was that a good place to actually send somebody? Yes, it was the only place in that county, but could I have had a national resource where I knew someone who could have called and assisted? I definitely think we have the benefit with that here, with those resources. But the why part is just a huge existential question that I could go down a rabbit hole with and won't. But that said, the why part is made up of so many things. And I think the best thing that an individual can do is know that you'll never 100% understand all the whys. But the comforting piece to that is you can learn about why people feel like that's their option or their resort, or why they feel trapped in that. It will never get better. All of the things we hear that are normalized without the educational piece behind it. So we hear they felt like they were never going to get better, or they had tried to get a diagnosis or a medication that was going to help them and they couldn't. And then that's why they took their life. That was a piece of it. That was a piece of it. And I think what really helped me let go of the why piece and really apply evidence-based modalities, treatments, resources, is understanding trauma. And the more that I dug into trauma in human beings and the effects that it has on the body, the mind, and where it all started, like what was the origin point? Was it childhood? Was it combat exposure? Whatever it was, helped me understand that little old me was not going to ever be able to tell someone the whole why, but I could understand how I could assist now, what I could do for the people who are still here. And I can normalize when we need to start talking more about trauma. We need to be less scared or more upfront of saying something doesn't seem right. Ever since this happened the other day, you know, and understanding that we hold that until it's expressed. We hold that trauma until it's expressed. Just that normalization can help someone get past the why and the loss of control and give back some control with that education. And again, I can go down the trauma rabbit hole for hours, because that's trauma-informed care is a big love of mine, but that education piece and being able to offer someone who still hears something that might be able to be helpful.
Lost the unmute button. Okay. Annie, do we have any last questions before we're in our last 5 minutes?
Yes, I think this might be the last one. What are some ways that I can educate my site leadership on signs on how to prevent suicide?
Interesting. I think this is really important because I started out in operations at Amazon. So I worked in the fulfillment centers, and there are so many different backgrounds in one building. There's so many different experiences, and life outside of Amazon is very, very different for every person, just like the military was. And I think it's really important to have a mental health and well-being affinity group at your building that can advocate for mental health in your building, or in your organization if you are virtual. Site leadership needs to be influenced sometimes that this is something that Amazon should care about. And I'm not saying Amazon, I'm saying every organization is the same way, because suicide is such a taboo topic. It's something that people are very scared to talk about. They're scared to talk about it in the wrong way. They're scared to provide the wrong training. They're scared to provide too much training. So the leadership needs to be educated sometimes. If they're not someone that is has a background in mental health counseling, or has a background in advocacy for mental health, they're not going to be familiar with the resources that are available, and they need help understanding that. And that's why your employee resource groups are so, so important, because they are there to educate that site leadership on what you can do in your building to make it more of an open space about mental health, to make it make resources more readily available, to allow your HR to be trained in some suicide prevention training that they might be able to help in situations like this. Loss prevention in most of your fulfillment centers are trained in suicide prevention, so I would reach out to your loss prevention specialist and ask them how you can bring training to your site if this is something that you really are passionate about, which I highly recommend. From a veteran perspective, our military affairs team is working on lots of different initiatives around mental health, and we share those through our interest list, and also through our warriors groups. We send that information through those. So participate and learn and bring those conversations or webinars like this to your building to help open the conversation and say, this is something that we need to talk about here. That's my advice. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
I was just going to say training. And it doesn't have to be a mental health specific training. So we're about to do another round of training for our business side of the house, and they're not going to go out and be in the field trying to de-escalate crises, but they are on conversations with families and different groups of people where they can affect that change and normalize those conversations. I'm sure Charlotte's, the list that she just gave of individuals that you could find those resources with have some of the same resources, but there are a couple of key trainings that we really like to use at that level. One of those trainings, for example, is Assist. Another, and there are many takeaways from that. And the other training that we really love, and I love Tony Pisani and his entire team, is Safe Side. And that is for anyone that may interface with someone that that may be having a mental health crisis or may be leading up to suicide. So it's very preventative, and it's just on how to have a conversation around prevention and to be more fluid with those conversations. So we can always provide more resources if that's helpful as well around different types of dynamic training.
Thank you so much. Yes. And we're at time, but we are going to share many resources with a follow-up email to anyone who registered for this webinar. So you'll receive that information and some more resources from Stop Soldier Suicide as well, so that you can look at those after the webinar. Thank you, Stop Soldier Suicide team, our mental health and well-being chapter, for joining us and helping to create safer communities within our organization and also in our community. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you.